Hi there, thank you so much for clicking the thumbnail and being interested in my work. In this video I share with you my techniques and tips on how to create shiny black leather. So be sure to watch it right through till the end, because here and there I'll be slowing things down in real time so you can take a closer look. So let's dive in and take a look. Now this study is a 6" by 4". So what I've done, like I normally do, is put a centre mark in the centre of my board, and then basically what I'm doing is using imaginary angles and comparing one shape with another, using vertical and horizontal plane, comparing one area with another area, so you're comparing shapes. Just running through this outline very quickly. If you want a more in-depth view of how I do the outline freehand, there's loads of videos in my channel which I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check them out later. Now for the underdrawing, this is the Carbothello white and black I use. So basically I'm putting it in very lightly. You've got to try and keep that tooth there, so you don't need to pile in loads of pigment. It's just an idea where things are. So basically the underdrawing is to get the shapes right. I'm not worried about getting the values correct or the chroma. It's all about getting everything in the right position. So it's an extension of the outline really. It's just making sure everything's right before you start laying in the heavy colour. It's really a fun stage this is, because it helps you to be loose because you're not worrying about the details, so you can just really relax and just get the basic structure in. Also it's very easier to actually erase any problems and change things at this early stage. If you go straight in there with heavy colour and pile it on, and then you find there's something wrong, it makes it very difficult then to actually change, because you've saturated that tooth of the surface, and you need that subtlety of tooth to create the balance and subtleties of the details. So that's why I always do a very light underdrawing, just to make sure everything's in the correct position. This illustrates just that, because I made a mistake with the heel there, but because it's very lightly put on, it's very easily to erase. Now I've used the Pastel kneadable eraser, amazing to have in your kit. It's a great tool. It don't damage the pastel mat at all. Here's a little bit of real time, just showing you how I compare one shape with another to make sure that everything's in balance and correct. Now this is the darkest black I've got in my kits, which is the Caran d'Ache black. Now I'm mixing a bit of blue in there and a bit of red to create a bit more depth to the black. Black on its own tends to be a little bit dull, so always add a bit of colour with it. So I like to take my time with these layers, just slowly but surely building them up, just getting that drawing more and more accurate as you carry on. So throughout the stages I'm always comparing, always changing. That's what I love about freehand, because you've got the freedom to move things around. Just slowing it down to real time so you can see the pace I'm working at. So I do take my time with it, laying one layer on top of another, cross hatching, so one direction then the other direction, sometimes small circles to develop the texture. I vary the pressure as well, because there's certain sort of textures and feeling into that. It's not just one black colour, there's all sorts of different tones and tints. Now I'm laying over the white there because that helps to create a shine, and it creates the smoothness of the leather as well. So putting that little bit of white in there, and then again going over again with the black, and then putting that white in again, it creates like a shimmery dark smoothness to the black. All this is building the foundation for when I start mixing in and laying over with glazes or the subtleties using the primary colours. It just makes this black leather shimmer and come to life. All this will be explained later on. If you're enjoying this video, why not subscribe? It's absolutely free, and then you're sure not to miss any of my future videos. Now the only time I've used a blending tool is this cotton bud for the shadow of the actual shoe. because in the leather I prefer to use pencil over pencil to create the texture rather than using a cotton bud. The reason for this is I'm using a lot of Carbothello and Conti Paris pencils, which are very chalky. Now when you use like a blending tool or stump, what it tends to do is lift the pastel off too much, the surface, and I want it to mix around. So with those two brands it's best to use pencil over pencil. Now if you're solely just using one brand like Caran d'Ache or Faber-Castell, I would recommend using a cotton bud or stump because they are more difficult to move around. They seem to cling more to the pastel mat, so I would recommend doing that. But with these being chalky, they easily move and blendable, so that's why I tend to mix pencil over pencil. Now these are the basic colours I'm using in the dark areas of the black: ultramarine, yellow ochre and like a cold red. Just lightly mixing that and glazing over the top of what I've done, it creates a certain sort of harmony of colours because they've got your primaries and you can mix different subtleties. So what you're doing over that black you've put down is creating all these different tints and reflections and that. So you can mix any sort of colour really with those three combinations. Obviously, you know, you got your red, blue and yellow, and it makes it really subtle. Now I do add a lemon yellow and a different blue later on when I'm doing the light areas, because there's a different sort of reflected light on that, but I'll explain to you that later. But this is the key to making that black leather look realistic, is adding those primaries over the top of it and mixing it in with it. It just makes all the difference. Oh, and I did use the cotton bud for this area here just to soften the edge of the heel along with the shadow underneath the shoe. Now I'm using this blue here from the Conti Paris range, which is more of a true blue. See, the ultramarine blue you can actually mix by adding red with it, but this is more of a pure blue, and I'm mixing that in with it because you can get different subtleties using a pure blue rather than an ultramarine. It's all a case of trying different blues, different reds, different yellows and seeing what works combined together as the sort of primary mix, if you like. Because sometimes I use a burnt sienna as the red. You know, it all depends on what you're drawing. It's just a case of experimenting. If you're enjoying this video, why not give it a like and share it with your friends? It would mean so much to me, as this will help the channel to grow. Now I decided to go on to the lighter areas now before I go back into the dark ones. But I'm using lemon yellow here now with a light ultramarine to get that sort of vibrant chroma to it. A chroma means how much it glows. Now to help it glow as well is to use something like a Faber-Castell Pit White pencil or a Caran d'Ache White. The Carbothellos are not sharp enough, it's not bright enough to create the feeling you want, so you need those other two brands. And just glaze over then with certain colours, you know, the combination of the red, blue and yellow, but just try different blues and yellows just to see what works best. Now I use the Carbothello white, which I'm using here, to actually blend things, so that's a great white for blending. So you use these different pencils for different sort of effects. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all my Patreons for their wonderful support. Really appreciate it. If you're considering joining me on Patreon and would like the benefit of longer, slower and more in-depth videos, please check out the link in the description below. Now this study will be on there as a real-time audio, real-time video, so you'll be able to see every pencil I use, so you get a really close in-depth view of how I approach it, because I discuss it moment by moment as I progress through the study. Now this stage, which is the rich stage, it's like a blocking stage in a way, because I'm not really focused on detail. It's just getting everything the right value and the chroma. That's what I'm concentrating on with this stage. Run it down to real time now, so you can see how I'm blocking in the actual design of that part of the shoe. Now, the best thing to do is always try and find a pattern, so you get a pattern to it, so you block that pattern in, and then you can go in then with more details. I'm still here, I'm just putting a little bit of spot here and there, but this isn't still the detail stage. That will come on later on in the video. I'm still trying to get an idea where things are and glazing over, just playing about with it in preparation for the actual final touches, which is later on. Now focusing on the actual brightness and freshness of that shimmer, so I'm using the Caran d'Ache white, but then I'll smooth over the edges using the Carbothello white. This is how you can use these different brands for different things. I'll use the Faber-Castell white for the fine details later. Now I'm going for the darker areas now, so I'm looking for the darkest, so I'm comparing. Got to make sure that you don't go too dark. It has to be the right value. And now work on a 9 value system, which is 4 lights, 4 darks and a mid-tone. So I'm trying to work out the subtleties between each shade, because if you go too black, it'll look flat. It has to be, or too bright, it looks flat. It has to be all balanced and all the correct value for it to look realistic. Right, slowing it down again here so you can see how I'm drawing in the creases now. There's little bits of creases in the leather there. So I'm just putting that in very lightly with the Carbothello white, because it's very soft white, because it's chalky. It don't cause too much of a line, so it's very subtle. So that's why I'm using it there, and then just sort of very, very lightly changing the tints around that as well. So it's a really great tool. As a blending tool, actually, the white there, that Carbothello white, it's amazing to have in your kit. And this Carbothello black is quite a nice black to have. If you haven't got Carbothellos, just having a black and a white really helps with getting those subtleties. Now, I've mentioned this a lot in my videos, that if you open your heart, let go of the mind, and send this open heart feeling to the reference image that you're working from, it actually magnifies the energy of that reference image. It's surprising the amount of energy that comes back to you. And if you just open your heart, let go of your mind, this energy flows through you, out the hands and into your work. And it does make a difference to the overall feeling of the painting or study what you're doing. It's surprising. Just slowing it down to real time now, just to show you how I'm putting the details in here. Now I'm using the Faber-Castell white, just putting a little dot here and there, just a little slight movement on the dot so it creates a stitch. And just take your time, just keep referring to the reference, come back, but try and get a pattern to it so it feels like the stitching. And then just glazing over then with certain colours, just to give it that sort of natural look to it, because if you just put the white stitching in there, it'll just glare out too much. You have to put that subtlety on the white stitch, and then once you've done that, is to go over again with the black, just to refine that stitch. So adding the slightest touch. This is a Faber-Castell black, which is again really good for detail because it's a hard lead on it, and you can sharpen the point quite sharp, and it does the job pretty well. I'm quite liking these pit pastels for details. So just refining everything, and then just going over again with the Faber-Castell pit white. These final details, I always look in the mirror a lot, so I turn my back to the drawing, look at the mirror, so it's over the shoulder and looking at the drawing and the reference image, and it brings out these imperfections that you can just touch up, and it just makes all the difference seeing it from a different angle. Thank you so much for watching the video so far. Hope you've enjoyed it. Just to show you how small this study actually is, but they're really well worth doing. Now, if you wanted to see this as a real-time audio, real-time video, and actually observe me and hear me as I actually achieve this moment by moment. I really discuss it as I go along. Please check the link in the description below. It'll take you over to my Patreon page. Really appreciate the support. There's loads of videos on there now, so please head over there if you're interested in that. But in the meantime, if you want to see more of my work on YouTube, here's a video here to check out. Take care, thanks, bye.